Greetings all! Today, we will be examining the uncommon ground psychic-type Pokemon Baltoy, and its relatively rare evolution Claydol, collectively known as the Clay Doll Pokémon. Though they might not be among the most conventional of psychic-type Pokemon, the members of the Baltoy family are powerful defensive fighters that can definitely put their unique combination of attacks and techniques to good use to keep themselves from easily being taken down. Baltoy possess a light brown top-like body with a spherical main torso, a pointed cone attached to their bottom as a foot, a larger spheroid for a head with its own pointed spike on the top, and long, rectangular, ribbon-like arms that assist them in balancing on their foot. Their torso has a circular red marking on their front and one on their back, with a red band that encircles their entire body, while they have a similar red streak that loops around the tops of their eyes and reaches down in between them a little more than halfway through the crevice between their eyes. Their eyes are seemingly always shut, appearing as dome-like structures with a dividing furrow that separates them into two halves and rings around the entirety of their head. Their evolved form, Claydol, have dark black bodies with a spherical torso as well, and two tiny cone-like protrusions with blunted tips on their undersides they use to rest on the ground if needed, though they generally prefer to levitate off of the ground instead. The torso has a pair of white circular markings on the front with slight extensions pointing towards their lower end, complete with a yellow dot in the center of each marking, with a single marking of the same form being found on their back. Their heads are in the shape of a squashed sphere, with a pointed protrusion on their head whose tip is blunted, likely from a lack of need to ever balance on it due to their levitation power. Their face consists of a series of bright red eye markings with yellow, beak-like protrusions between each eye on their lower end, while a thick white marking, similar to that seen in Baltoy, rims the upper halves of their eyes and extends downward halfway in the space between their eyes, of which only two are regularly active, signified with a line-shaped pupil instead of a dot. Their arms are spheroid in form, with a pointed protrusion on the end like a finger, which they use to focus and release beams of concentrated energy, the appendages additionally floating alongside the creature at all times, kept aloft by their psychic power. The members of the Baltoy family are strange artificial creatures whose origins and purpose of creation are still a great mystery and in turn serve as an example of the advanced and abnormal technological power accessible to ancient human civilizations, this case in particular referencing the ancient inhabitants of the Hoenn Desert. It is believed that these creatures were once merely muddy clay figurines that were made by the inhabitants of the Hoenn Desert when it was still habitable, with Claydol in particular being thought to have been designed after something that the people of this civilization saw descend from the sky on one occasion, though whether or not you believe this feeds into the notion of aliens visiting the planet is up to you. Regardless, at some point or another, it seems that these clay figures were exposed to an unusual ray of light energy that somehow brought them to life and granted them both sentience and psychic power. How this came to be is still a complete mystery, as is whether or not the exposure was intentional or accidental. Regardless, depictions of them among murals and ancient ruins in the Hoenn Desert place their time of creation at around 20,000 years ago, and it seems that the fact that their bodies are made out of fairly common materials in the region is the primary reason why they have been able to perpetuate their existence for so long, treating others of their kind as their numbers begin to dwindle. Contrary to what their forms might suggest though, their bodies are not fired at all, only maintaining their rigid form as a result of interlocking grains and cement that is formed when the clay comprising them is exposed to a little bit of water and then rapidly dried. Unfortunately, this process is not one that these creatures can perform on their own, so they have to find a way to avoid water, as it will cause their bodies to melt. Baltoy must usually seek shelter to do this, but Claydol possess strong enough psychic powers that they can form psychic energy shields around them to protect them in the case of a rainstorm. The psychic power that these creatures can wield is not incredibly strong, though it can be harnessed to an extreme in allowing them to learn the self-destruct and explosion attacks naturally, but they do gain access to a number of special techniques that help them occupy a strong defensive position in a fight, which is helped out even more by the rigid form of the clay they are made out of and its unique energy deflecting properties. At the very least, the psychic power contained within them allows them to regularly float above the ground at nearly all times, or at the very least results in minimal contact with the ground, helping them to avoid ground-based attacks and in turn granting them access to the levitate ability. In terms of stats, in the case of Clay Doll, the materialistic nature of their form and the limited degree to which it can channel psychic power offensively means that their base HP, attack, and special attack stats are below average for a fully evolved ground and psychic type Pokemon. And while they are relatively mobile, their base speed stat is only above average for a fully evolved ground type Pokemon. Thankfully, the resilient nature of their bodily materials and their unique energy deflecting properties grant them impressive defenses, with both their base defense and special defense stats being above average for a fully evolved Pokemon of both their types, going so far as to possess the highest base special defense stat out of all ground-type Pokemon and non-legendary psychic-type Pokemon, being tied with Mr. Mime for the latter. As such, while they might not have a tremendous amount of offensive power to bear, these living sculptures can definitely take a hit and keep right on going, using their abnormal powers to blast their opposition to bits over the course of a long battle. Originally discovered among ancient ruins alongside their evolved form, Clay Doll, Baltoy naturally have the power to levitate off of the ground, but most of the time, they instead prefer to stand upon it using their singular foot, even when asleep, using their psychic power to assist them in balancing on it perfectly and spinning their bodies around like a top when moving around. It is uncertain what causes this behavior, but it can often prove to be quite mesmerizing to observe as a result of their perfectly balanced form. They do not stay on their foot all of the time though, as these creatures have also been observed spinning on the point that lies on the top of their head, generally doing so when they are deep in thought and are trying to solve some sort of complex problem. While their limited access to actual ground-type offenses can make them a bit hard to work with from that perspective, Baltoy are still fairly intelligent automatons and can make good partners for any aspiring specialist in the ground or psychic types. But it is nonetheless noted that owners should be careful about letting their Baltoy get near others of its kind. This is a problem because these creatures are generally very sociable with others of their kind, and if they spot another Baltoy, they will rush to it and start crying loudly through air taken in and expelled through the slits in their eye markings, which will cause the other to do the same as they both try and summon other Baltoy to join them and commit to the action to the point where it can be overwhelming to one's hearing. They thankfully are not loud enough to cause long-lasting hearing damage, but they still can be quite annoying in this case and can cause headaches over time, so caution is recommended when taking these creatures anywhere near ancient ruins and old graveyards where they commonly congregate. While they do have small structures on their body that can allow them to rest on the ground, Clay Doll prefer to stay levitated above the ground at all times, and can do so with their advanced telekinesis, even when they are asleep. Unlike Baltoy, these creatures are able to wield their psychic powers beyond simply animating their body or utilizing basic psychic type attacks, as evolution not only grants them access to the teleport technique, but, more importantly, allows them to channel their inner power to attack with devastating beams of energy. The arms of Clay Doll are separated from their form in order to allow them to perform a number of actions from afar without having to get close to a target to attack. But most importantly, this choice of anatomical form allows them to use their separated arms as conduits and storage units for charging up and storing excessive amounts of energy, away from their body where this intense charging process might cause them to overload. Once their arms have reached their maximum energy capacity, these automatons can then release the stored energy as a pair of powerful energy beams. This in turn grants them immediate access to the Hyper Beam attack as soon as they evolve. Sadly, few trainers will have the chance to use this power on their team if they haven't raised a Baltoy to the point of evolution, as wild Clay Doll are extremely aggressive towards others, especially if they sense that the ancient ruins and graveyards they call home are intruded upon by an unknown force. The only good thing about this is that much like Baltoy, Clay Doll are more intelligent than they might initially appear, and can thus be reasoned with if a bit of effort to do so is expended, making the exploration of the locations they call home by explorers an easier task, so long as one does not try to outright attack them first, lest they feel the wrath they can bring both alone and in numbers when they call for backup against potential threats. While they might not be able to bring the pure offensive power seen in many other ground and psychic type Pokemon, the members of the Baltoy family are interesting creations that can definitely prove to be strong walls against just about anything that gets thrown their way. Their method of evolution may not still be fully understood, but that should be the least concern one has when going up against one of these living clay sculptures in a fight. If you feel compelled to try and add one of these creatures to your collection, make sure that you bring plenty of backup and be prepared for the worst. Having them blow up in your face can be bad enough, but if these automatons get the chance to summon backup, especially in the case of Clay Doll, you may be in a great deal of trouble in facing the torrent of energy beams that will likely be immediately pointed in your direction. Thank you all for watching this video. It is always an honor to be able to speak with you all on the subject of Pokemon in a way that brings me great joy and happiness in my work. If you would like to keep tabs on past and future work, click that subscribe button, check out my work on DeviantArt, and don't be shy about following me on Twitter, where you can find pertinent announcements on upcoming work before it is officially posted. Links to both can be found in the video description. If you would like to support my work and help Miguel and I continue to produce more content for you and improve upon our presentation, please visit us at my Patreon page, which you can also find a link to in the video description.
Yeah, no.
With that, I thank you for watching and I wish you well.